The vice guild master walked up behind Gidju, and then asked him who that was up in the sky. As Michael was using his holy powers to blast the monsters that were on the ground below him. Gidju told him while pointing upwards that it was someone from the Vatican, and while he doesn't have the best personality, but he's definitely strong. Then told the vice guild master that he will be moving separately from the main group from this point onwards, which caused others around him to be surprised. Both Sung-hoon and Yubin protested at the same time, telling him that it was too dangerous. In response, he said that was precisely why he was doing this. They couldn't keep getting delayed every time they ran into a monster swarm. And it would be faster for him to move alone and search for the others. Getting agitated, he continued to say that even while they are discussing this, Siku. But at that moment, Do-hyung interrupted him, saying that he appreciated his concern for their guild master, but he still thinks it's too dangerous for him to go alone, since even his guild master went missing after coming here alone. Then Gidju asked if it would be okay if he wasn't alone, which caused Do-hyung to be confused. Then pointing his sword at Michael, he told him that he will be bringing him along. At that moment, Michael felt an evil intent directed towards him. Then looking in all directions, tried to figure out where this ominous feeling was coming from. Yubin shouted that she also wanted to tag along, since she knew that both him and that person was strong, but she still thinks just the two of them alone was too dangerous. But Gidju declined her offer, saying that she needed to lead her guild, and he was sorry to say this, but in order to be of help to him, she needed to be at least this strong. Then quickly leaped up into the air, right in front of the approaching horde of monsters. He used his elemental fire and spirit fusion to infuse his black sword with the power of elemental flame. Then activating the divine power from the white sword, he raised both swords above his head. While swinging his swords, released the powers contained in them both to demolish all the monsters in front of him. The others watching this scene just stood there with their eyes wide open in surprise at what they saw. Everything including the ground was devastated by the single attack. After killing a chimera, the system notified him that his HP was being increased after he absorbed its blood, as well as absorbing the soul of the chimera. As Gidju was wondering about the absorbed soul, Lu told him that it was another ability that he gained from his evolution, and told him to check his status window. As he looked at the window, he noticed the new skills absorption, which allows him to be able to absorb the blood and souls of monsters he has damaged, and egoification, which has the possibility that he can egoify an absorbed soul. This would allow him to get egos without even using cannibalism. Then with this, he won't have to worry about getting egos that are required for their evolution. While Brunhart congratulated the master, Lu told him that he was the one who obtained the ability, so why was the master getting the congratulations instead of him? A disgruntled Michael walked up behind Gidju while cursing, saying why was he traveling alone with him, and he felt disgusted, because it felt like he was being controlled by him. And Gidju replied that despite saying that, he still tagged along, asking him if he came along just because he liked following him. If so, then stop saying such horrible things. But Michael replied that the reason he tagged along was because he thought he might be able to accomplish his objectives if he did so. Then Gidju asked what his objectives were. Raising a finger, Michael said that one of them was to kill the demons, the sworn enemies of the Vatican, and the other is, for someone to know him. Gidju just stared at him without saying a word, and Michael just let out a sigh and told him to let's get going, asking him didn't his friend need to be saved. Suddenly Gidju shouts wait, and pointing to the crystals on the ground, asked Michael if he was just going to leave them all behind like this, saying if he's wasteful just because he was rich, he might turn into a pauper in an instant. But Michael nervously asked if he didn't say earlier that there was no time, so they couldn't waste time pickling up crystals. But Gidju told him not to worry, since it would only take a second. Then he opened a gate, which completely shocked Michael, as skeleton warriors came out of the gate to collect the crystals. Lu asked him if it was okay to reveal this to him, and Gidju said that this was a power he will eventually have to reveal in the fight later anyways, so it will make things go smoother this way. Brunhart asked if he was finally getting a chance to show off his powers. Michael was thinking that, not only does he possess the power of a demon and divine power, he can also create gates. Just who on earth was he? Then as they arrived at the huge hole in the ground, Gidju asked if this was it, to which Michael agreed that it was. As Gidju saw the crystals lying on the ground, he could see the traces of battle in the area, so probably Siku was all the way down this pit. Michael asked how were they going to go down, when they couldn't even see the bottom of this pit, while he could use his wings, but for him. But Gidju said that he can also fly if he needed to, but there won't be a need for that, since they can probably just jump into this hole without any problems, since it's connected to another space. Lu commented that it was correct. There's some kind of portal device below, and that's a trick that makes use of demonic arts, and he was surprised that his master could detect it. Michael nervously asked if he could sense something like that, since for him it's hard to believe, but he's starting to think such things aren't that strange for him. Then in that case, Gidju started to strike the ground with his sword. When asked what he was doing, he replied that since even Michael couldn't sense it, that means it'll be the same for the others, so he was just leaving them a note here, while Lu complained that he was being treated like a pen. Soon after, they both jumped into the pit, wondering what kind of powerful demon was waiting for them. The system notification informed him that he was entering the territory of Bodhis, and he has been recognized as a lord, so obtained the right to declare territory war. Landing on the ground, he wondered about the territory war. Then turning to Michael and asked if he hear any system voices as well, but Michael only looked back puzzled and asked what system voices. And Gidju asked if he heard anything about entering the sphere of influence of demonic energy. The Lord has noticed the intruder, or something similar to that. Then Gidju wondered if something was different, and Lu replied that of course it's different. He was not in the same position as him, to which Gidju agreed. Since he can control gates, in a sense he was a lord of a gate, so was that what the system referred to as having the qualification of a lord? Lu mentioned that this was the territory of Bodhis. And Gidju asked him if he knew who that demon was. And Lu replied that while it's not an archdemon, it is however a demon on the same level as one, and he's a demon who doesn't really have any special abilities, but he climbed to where he was right now with just his combat abilities. Gidju could only think that this means that he's just that strong, and Lu agreed. Then noticing that Gidju wasn't moving, Michael asked him what he was doing, since they needed to get moving. As they walked down the corridor, Gidju told Michael to cover the rear, while he will watch the front. Then with the next step, Gidju started to shake violently while falling to his knees. He was feeling like his head was about to burst. While Al asked him if he was okay, and Lu said that maybe this was normal. Since the demonic energy is energy that is close to death, and for him who is barely managing to maintain the balance between life and death, so leaning towards one side, the balance will be broken. Michael asked him if he was alright, to which Gidju just replied that it was nothing. Then Michael noticed Gidju's eyes, while Lu told his master that his demonic eyes were showing. Gidju nervously tried to explain that these were his colored contact lenses, while Michael asked if he thought he was that easy to deceive, and did he take him for a fool. Meanwhile on another battlefield, a player was saying that he didn't expect a big shot like Beautiful Beard would come. Introducing himself as Choi Changyong from the Blue Dragon Guild, and he'd like to thank him for his assistance. High ranker Tao Chen was laughing and saying that his country has received assistance from the Korean Association in the past, so he was here to repay the favor. But this situation doesn't look very good though, and Changyong replied that it couldn't be helped since the level of the gate is different. While stroking his bread, Tao Chen mentioned that he heard the team was split into two, so asked wouldn't it be better to move as one team. However, Changyong let out a long sigh and said that he didn't intend to fight while carrying burdens on his team, and when asked about burdens, he replied it's nothing. Then turning to his guild members, he shouted that they will be departing again in 10 minutes, so make sure they are resupplied and prepared by then. Then stated that he won't be sharing credits with some brat, who's over his head, just because he has the support of the association. At these words, Tao Chen just pondered while stroking his beard. Meanwhile back in the tunnels, Michael was still asking about those eyes, but Gidju just replied color contact lenses, and kept walking ahead. But Michael replied no, those are demons, but Gidju cut him off and said color contact lenses. Michael just shook his head and said, seriously, he gets more and more mysterious as time passes, while Gidju with a stoic face replied that's good, now that he knows, now shut up. With his arms folded across his chest, he asked if they were even heading in the right direction, since he's been moving without any hesitation this whole time. And Gidju replied that they are heading in the direction where he feels the strongest demonic energy, and their object is the gatekeeper. Michael complimented him, saying that he's considered pretty sensitive to demons, but Gidju's detection ability is truly astonishing, and he couldn't help but acknowledge how good it is. But at that moment, Gidju came to a sudden stop, and said right ahead. Looking ahead, he said he can feel Sequa's energy coming from over there. Michael was a bit nervous and said he didn't understand, but in the next moment Giju activated his haste ability and rushed forward, leaving Michael in his dust. This shocked Michael, and shouting "Wait for me," rushed after Giju. As he rushed forward, he cursed Giju, calling him a bastard, and wondering just how fast was he. Then put on the brakes when we saw Giju just standing still in front of him. Then asked why did he suddenly stop without warning, but was shocked at what he saw in front of him. The tunnel led to an opening, which contained lots of cocoons tied together with webbing. Michael asked what are these cocoons, and why are there so many of them? This could be even called a city of cocoons. Giju told him that Sequel was one of them. Then closing his eyes to compose himself, he opened them again, and told Lu and El that they were going in right away. But in a panic Lu told him to wait. Since the inside was Bodhi's dwelling, and since this was a demon stronghold, it will have all sorts of barriers and traps deployed, so even he wouldn't be able to dodge them all. But Giju asked what he should do then, since nothing will get resolved if he just stood around. Meanwhile Michael was puzzled standing beside Giju, wondering what on earth was Giju murmuring to himself about. Lu asked if his master was an idiot, had he forgotten what he heard from the system a moment ago. Then Giju recalled the system notification telling him that he had obtained the right to declare territory war. Giju shouted out loud that he was declaring a territory war, and the system notification informed him that a territory war has been declared. As Michael noticed his hand starting to fade, the system notified them that they will be teleported to another location for a territory war. In a panic Michael asked what's happening, as both of them started to get teleported away. When their teleportation was completed, the system notification stated that the victor will take everything. Meanwhile in front of the huge pit, both the teams met each other earlier than they expected. As Chan Yong was looking at the members of the other team, he noticed something was off. He asked them where was Kim Giju, don't tell him that he died already, while Beautiful Beard was wondering about Kim Giju. Do Hyung was a bit nervous and said, that's not it. But at that moment, their conversation was interrupted by a guild member calling their attention to something over there. On the ground, there was a message written by Giju. They looked at the message and concluded that he jumped down the pit first. Shanyong stated that he couldn't believe that guy keeps doing whatever he pleases. That Kim Giju keeps choosing to do things that he disliked. Overhearing the comment, Tao Chen asked is he heard wrongly, but was he talking about Morningstar Kim Giju, to which Chanyong turns around and asked if he knows him, telling him that's the burden that he mentioned earlier. And now, he's just doing whatever he wants, but Tao Chen thinks that Giju didn't seem like someone who would do that though. Chanyong loudly remarks that this Kim Giju person doesn't seem to be very trustworthy, asking the others if they trust him and willing to jump down there. Pointing to the bottomless pit, saying he can't do that. But Yubin got angry at this, and said he was going a little overboard with his words. But her elder touched her arm to restrain her and said, hold it in Yubin, this was no time for them to quarrel among themselves. Yubin turned to the elder in protest, but at that moment, the system notification informed everyone that a territory war has been declared, and they will be teleported to another location for a territory war. Everyone was shocked and puzzled, as they were being teleported away. Suddenly they reappeared in another location, looking around dazed and confused. They tried to figure out where they were. Shangyong stated that he heard something about a territory war, and Beautiful Beard also agreed that he heard it as well, and based on what a demon working with China told him, the demons used this method to determine their ranks and to get stronger easily. Turning towards him, Shangyong asked why they would be involved in a battle between demons. And Beautiful Beard replied that he didn't know the details, but suggested that someone in their party might be a demon. At that moment, Giju appears with Michael in tow, and asked if this was where the territory war will take place, and Lu answered that since the territory would get destroyed if an intense fight broke out there, so this was a measure to minimize the damage as much as possible. Upon seeing him, Yubin and Sunghoon both called his name in joy. Shanyong on the other hand disdainfully called his name and asked Tao Chun who was that beside him, and was told that he was part of the reinforcements sent from the Vatican. Just like him, that player was also dispatched to Korea to assist them. Grinning with anticipation, Shangyong said that he can sense a strong energy coming from him, and concluded that Giju could move as he pleased because of that man's help. Then shouted rudely at Giju, said that he will make him take responsibility for moving off alone. Since he is the leader of the Blue Dragon Guild, will be in charge of the battle, and the rest of those who were gathered to just focus on giving them support and not getting in their way. At this, Giju just stared back at him, and remarked that they won't be enough, which caused Chanyong to awkwardly say what? Suddenly the ground started to shake violently, and everyone started to look at the battlefield in shock. As vague shadows started to appear on the horizon, the ground shook hard enough to crack the surface. The enemy forces, consisting of both small and large mantis monsters, appeared before them. As the sheer number of the enemies charged towards them, a huge dust cloud created in their wake. The players started to panic, and asked how were they supposed to deal with those numbers of enemies before them. Chanyong looked at this scene and silently panicked, since doing a quick estimation would put the number of enemies at several hundred, and not to mention at least 3 commander-level monsters. Then, shaking with fear, he wondered if they could overcome them all. Giju told them to wait a minute, and said that they were in his way, so step aside. Chanyong just turned his head to look back and asked what was he talking about. But Giju just let out a sigh, then without explaining himself opened his gate, shocking the surrounding players with this ability. Then from within, skeleton soldiers started to step out of the gate, and griffins flew out and filled the sky. All the players could only watch this with open mouth, shocked as powerful monsters started to appear one after another. A huge griffin, a death knight, and a powerful lich. Chanyong could only stare and said that this was ridiculous. What on earth was he looking at right now? As Giju's armies continued to pour out of the gate onto the battlefield, the bewildered players could only stare in shock. And as energy coursed in the sky, an angelic figure appeared onto the battlefield. It was the evolved adult version of L. Subscribe to the channel for the next part. Thank you for watching, until next time.